ॐ सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. My name is Dr. Piyush Kantipal. We are delighted to have with us our sir, Professor Ghanti S. Murthy, the National Coordinator of IKS Division, and our Madam, Dr. Vishwajanani Saptigiri, the Head of the TKDL Unit, and Sir Anil Kumar Sir, the Senior Scientist of TKDL Unit. So today we welcome to IKS-TKDL workshop on traditional knowledge, intellectual property, people's rights. So today we'll have two part sessions. The first session will be led by our sir. Then it will be followed by the second session, which Madam will take. Now, before we start, we just want to share some important informations. So we request all of you to give attention because we'll have a short assessment on a daily basis that will be the part of your final scoring that will lead a assessment certificate, and all study materials, PPTs, videos, and any updates will be available in the Google Drive folder, which you have already received through mail. And with a brief introduction of sir, we'll start the session. Sir, I am very pleased to introduce Sir Professor Ghanti.
Piyush Mahodaya, let's keep the introduction very, very small.
Yes, I am just very brief. I'm just being very brief. The National Coordinator of IKS Division, sir, is permanently faculty member in the Department of Bioscience and Biomedical Engineering at IIT Indore. Before joining IIT Indore, sir served as a tenured full professor at the Biological and Ecological Engineering Department of Oregon State University, USA. He is also the co-founder of GRW Engineering LLC, a company dedicated to recovering valuable resources like fertilizers, metals, and organics from landfill litter. His research focuses on sustainable bioprocessing and system analysis. We are fortunate to have Sir with us today. He will talk about introduction to IKS, especially with a focus on the IPR relevant sections. Over to you, sir.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Piyush Mahodaya, for that introduction. And I'm really delighted to see and participate for the first time probably in the TKDL workshop series that we have done so many times. And so delighted to share the swing with you, Vishwajanani and Anil Kumarji. Really pleasure taking this forward. And without any further ado, I will start my screen. I hope I'll just share my screen. Hope you can see that. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you see my slides moving?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. I will take about 25 minutes to basically talk about this thing today. And yeah, I'll take about 25 minutes to start do this. And we'll talk about the Indian knowledge systems, the relevance and importance in a changing world from, as Piyush Mahodaya was saying, from a perspective of how we look at things, whether we want to, when we talk about the intellectual property rights. And one of the biggest things that we talk about when we talk about Indian knowledge systems is the definitions of what Indian knowledge systems are varied. And then also, what is it that we are talking about when we talk about the knowledge systems, and what is to be protected, what is not to be protected, what is public and what is not, is something that needs to be talked about. So I will be touching on those things briefly. And if you notice things, essentially, the world is facing existential challenges. And we all know that we will be about 10 billion people in another 25 years. So in India, we are talking about Amrit Kal, but the world is also going to go through a very different scenario at that time in the next 25 years. So essentially till 1947, if we are going to talk about Amrit Kal in India, the population of the world will also go from 7.4, 7.5 billion people today to about 10 billion. So how are we going to get the food for them? How are we going to produce the food? Make sure that everybody has access to clean water, drinking water, and then all the resources from metals, plastics, all of those things that are mined from the earth. How do we ensure that everybody lives at least the basic needs of everybody is taken care of? And this is something that we need to really, really think about, because we are living in essentially a limited resource planet. I mean, we don't have too many resources. We don't have any other option. We don't have a plan B. The only plan is to make sure that the resources on earth are properly utilized. And in that kind of a scenario, there are limits to growth, what you can do, what you can grow, and how much we can grow. And in that scenario, we'll need to be really be thinking not just about the supply side of the things, that is trying to produce more biofuels, more renewable energies, or more minerals or things like that, mining from deeper oceans and deeper basically aquifers for water, or deeper oceans for petrol and petroleum. In all of these things which focus on the supply side of things, we also need to focus on the demand side of things. And all of these challenges, when we look at it, can only be addressed by working from a systems perspective. And the perspective needs to change. Until now, in fact, even today, when we look at how the existential challenges are being tackled with, broadly, when it comes to the implementation level and things like that, we're still working in silos. So we are like the six blind men looking to understand the elephant, like the Panchatantra story says. And we are all focused on our domains. And then what we need is to open our eyes. And how do we do that? Because one of the things that we need to do is, when these siloed approach, when we take siloed approaches, the challenge is that it can lead to problems that are much bigger than the basically the original problem itself. The solutions can lead to problems which create bigger problems than the original problem that we are going to solve. Therefore, we need to take that kind of a systems approach, and then to solve these existential crises, whether we talk about access to food, access to medicine, access to quality life, access to water, all of those things. And it is in that perspective that the Indian knowledge systems really helps. Because when we talk about Indian knowledge systems, it is not just about another method. It is not just about another technique in mathematics that our ancestors did better. It is about the entire perspective of how we look at things. Because every civilization has developed a perspective that is important for itself and that is unique to itself. So how we basically look at the relationships between ourselves and the environment and the nature itself and the universe at large is something that is very unique to the kind of civilization that perspective that we are getting. So that is where the Indian knowledge systems distinguishes itself. Again, remember that this is not something that is only unique to India. We have knowledge systems in Western nations also, the Greek and basically Roman knowledge systems. We have Chinese knowledge systems, which they have their own mandate of heaven kind of a perspective that they look at it. And you have many Native American and many cultures in Africa which have their own, even basically many native cultures of Australia, New Zealand, they have their own perspectives. Even the Islamic civilization empires had their own perspective of the world. So these are all very different perspectives. Today, the most dominant perspective that is dominating the academia, economic systems, healthcare systems, all of that is the Western perspective. Now, as Einstein said, if we want to solve the problems that were created because of this, for the lack of better alternative, Western perspectives, then we need to change our perspective and have more tools to solve it. We cannot keep operating in the same paradigm. And that is where the value of the Indian knowledge systems comes in, because it gives you a very fresh perspective to look at the same old problems and new problems as well. So which are much more holistic, because that is the nature of the Indian knowledge systems itself. So I will try to show you a few things here. That how did this knowledge system come about? As I said, every civilization has its own unique way of getting and developing the knowledge systems in their own way. And in our case, we had basically the knowledge systems of India arose from deep experience, observation, experimentation, and rigorous analysis. And of what? Of our interactions with the practical world. That was the Vijnana. When we interact with the world, that is the Vijnana that we are talking about. And that, when you distill it, it becomes the corpus of knowledge, the jnana. And that jnana, when it is distilled, that knowledge is distilled into wisdom, is basically the Jivana Darshana. So the jnana, vijnana, and the Jivana Darshana are the triad which essentially form the core of what we talk about as Indian knowledge systems. Is my audio audible?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Excellent, excellent. So I saw a comment that said no, so that's right. Thank you so much. So the Jivana Darshana is essentially a distilled wisdom that comes from the jnana, the knowledge. And how is the knowledge transmitted? It is transmitted through textual, oral, and artistic traditions. And then how is it documented? It is documented in the basically all the languages of Bharat. And how it is practiced? It is practiced through education, arts, administration, law, justice, any domain of basically our human endeavor is essentially this triad of the vijnana, the practical interactions with the universe, the jnana, the knowledge system that is distilled from it, and then finally the wisdom that comes out of it is the Jivana Darshan. This triad expresses itself in multiple ways in multiple domains. When it expresses itself in particular domain, we call it as a drishti. And when this jnana is transmitted, that is essentially the parampara. And the vijnana, the practical knowledge, leads to laukika prayojana, practical utility to solve some kind of a problem. Remember that in Indian knowledge systems, every knowledge was not acquired not just for some sake of some pure knowledge sake. In India, knowledge was not looked upon as power. You see, the knowledge is power is a very Western way of looking at things. In Bharat, we had a very different way of looking at knowledge. What was it? Nahi jnanena sadrusham pavitrameha vidyate, says Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan in Bhagavad Gita. There is nothing that purifies like knowledge. Knowledge was for purification. So this knowledge was also something that actually had prayojana in it. Without prayojana, we did not pursue knowledge for the sake of pure knowledge. We said it has to purify, it has to do something for us. And that was the laukika prayojana. So this drishti that I was talking about is something that makes the system Indian. So let's say I talk about mathematics. So there is Greek mathematics, and there is an Indian mathematics. So you may ask, what makes this mathematics Indian? What is so unique about this mathematics that we developed, what that was developed in India, that we should use the adjective Indian to this? That is the drishti. For example, the Greek mathematics is much more axiomatic, whereas the Indian mathematics is much more algorithmic in its approach. So you will see that kind of a thing manifested in various ways. So when we talk about parampara, it has three parts. That is probably more relevant to this workshop that we are going to have in next 5 days. Is that when we talk about maintaining the flow of knowledge, that is the parampara, transmitting it, first thing that comes to our mind is the preservation of the knowledge. So preservation, whenever we talk about preservation, immediately our mind goes and then says, oh, I need to preserve the manuscripts, books must be preserved, that knowledge has to be copied and somehow preserved in a digital form or some kind of a form that lasts many centuries and things like that. But that is not about it. That is not the only thing. That is a necessary condition, but that is not a sufficient condition. For us, when we talk about preservation, we also need to be talking about the preserving the drishti, that unique perspective that makes it unique. So if we take the allopathy, Ayurveda drugs, for example, the medicines from Ayurveda, and don't use it according to the Ayurvedic frameworks, the drishti of Ayurveda, then there is no point in it. So we may be preserving on the superficially the medicinal properties and the preparations, but then if we don't understand the fundamental framework and don't preserve that, then we are not doing a good service to that. So that is the preservation part. So the two parts, one is the physical preservation of the text, all of those things. Second is the preservation of the drishti. And then It is not enough to preserve. It is also important to take it up and take it to the next generation. That is, we need to take the Indian knowledge systems and any knowledge systems for that matter, and then transmit it to the next generation. How do we do that? We'll have to adapt to the times that we are talking about. So if we say that everybody has to go and sit under a tree like they used to show in old movies and all that, today it is not possible. Today we'll have to use, like for example, right now we are using WebEx. So we have to use these kind of tools to transmit the knowledge and adapt. Maybe this time we can have many more simulations, all of those things that can be shown. So these are all ways to transmit the knowledge in the most using the most technological tools that are available to us. That is the second part, the transmission, the preservation and the transmission. And the third most important part is that whenever we talk about a knowledge parampara, the jnana parampara, it is important to understand that it is not a stagnant thing. It is not that some text was written some 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago and that will stay static. If something stays static, I cannot, for example, you see, if I tell you that we'll have to use the chemistry textbooks from 1800s, you'll all laugh today because there has been so much of advancement in the last 1.5 centuries. Similarly, in physics, mathematics, all of those domains. Similarly, in the Bharati Jnana Parampara also, has not been a static area. Yes, it has been slow in the last 2 centuries, slowed down significantly in the last 2 centuries, and particularly for the last 1,000 years. But overall, things have been moving, maybe at a slow pace, but still moving. So this is not, therefore, IKS is not about history studies. And knowledge creation has been continuous in the Indian knowledge systems. This is one thing that we have to remember, that we have to talk about creation, knowledge creation, as well as studying preservation and the transmission. And therefore, IKS is not history studies. And IKS, there is a misconception that it is all about Vedas, Upanishads, and Puranas. No, IKS is not about Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, or Bhagavad Gita or Hindu studies. In fact, if you look at the entire corpus of the Sanskrit literature, only 5% or so is related to the Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas. Rest 95% are about other shastras like Natya Shastra, Vastu Shastra, Sangeeta Shastra, basically Vyakarana, Chanda Shastra, all of these linguistics, phonetics, dance, music, basically mathematics, astronomy, civil engineering, architecture, foundational engineering, agriculture, you name it, it is there. And that is what is essentially the 95% of the corpus. So to label that or mislabel it as Hindu studies or Vedas or Upanishads is a wrong notion. So we need to understand this part, that IKS is not simply about Hinduism or things like that. It is about the entire corpus of knowledge that was developed in the Indian subcontinent. So important that preservation, transmission, and creation must be considered in the this thing. Now, what is this Bharatiya Drishti that we are talking about, that perspective? In Bharatiya perspective, we have talked about the reality at three levels. Adi Bhautika at a physical plane, Adi Daivika at a mental plane, and then Adhyatmika or a spiritual plane. So anything that we look at, we always look at it at three levels. And then there is this Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, the Chaturvida Purusharthas. That is a framework for what is it that we want to achieve in life. The levels of reality or how we look at the universe. The four basically goals of life are the other pillar, and then four ashramas, four stages of life: brahmacharya, gruhastha, vanaprastha, sannyasa. Remember this, there is nothing religious about all of these things. These are the philosophy of life. This is the way that we interacted when we with the universe, ourselves, and the universe at large. So we look at reality as a adibhautika, a physical plane, adidaivika, mental plane, and adhyatmika, a spiritual plane. Then there are four goals to be pursued. That is dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So if you see, it is not always about moksha. This is not always about spirituality. There is about artha and kama are two big goals along with the dharma there. And then four ashramas, the four stages of life: brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyasa. This is essentially one of the drishtis, the philosophical underpinnings of the Bharatiya Jivana Darshana. And then it's very important for us to invest in IKS through scholars like you. Why? Because there is a real paucity of genuine scholarship in this field. And basically that leads to propagation of all kinds of myths and unscientific claims. So there is, people will say, oh, there is that shloka in 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, mattah parataram nasti kinchidasti dhananjaya, mai sarvamidam protam sutre maniga naiva. The sutra means string, just like a string is there in a necklace. So he's just saying, I'm in everything. So they will look at that string and then say, oh, there is string theory is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Or there is that other famous verse of the speed of light, all of these things. It is really doing damage to the IKS, the genuine IKS scholarship of whether you talk about Aryabhatta, Bhaskaracharya, Shushruta, or all of the scholars. This kind of claims damage. But then on the other side, you have people who will say, oh no, Indian science is a myth. Indians never did anything right. There was nothing called Indian math. You all imported it from Greeks, Babylonians, or Europeans. That is also not. As academicians, we know that the extreme positions that people take are completely wrong. And it is somewhere, the reality lies somewhere in between. We did adapt some things from the abroad. We contributed much, much more to this thing. And this is essentially something that we need to be thinking about. So therefore, this kind of a thing can be done only by genuine scholars. Therefore, we need to invest in the genuine scholarship. Therefore, who can do this? Higher educational institutions of India. There, the faculty there, researchers there, you need to do it. And then NEP also places great emphasis on multidisciplinary and multi-linguistic learning. These are all very, very important aspects of the investing in IKS. And NEP talks about it in multiple sections there. And IKS provides a unique perspective, is rigorous and innovative in its approaches. So if you think about it, let's take one look about what is that Jivana Darshana, that Drishti, how will it impact see, I was talking about the Drishti, I was talking about the Parampara, Jnana Parampara, and then the Laukika Prayojana. So what will happen if I change the Drishti? What will be the impact on the Laukika Prayojana? Let's look at this thing on the macroeconomics thing. So we all know that the capitalism is one form of economic systems. So where we talk about profit maximization, only profit maximization, it talks about that, nothing else. And it says everything else will allocate itself, resources will allocate itself. So that is essentially nothing but what we call as Shuddha Labh, only pure profit. And what will that lead to? It will lead to exploitation of humans and nature. We are seeing that in many, many Western democracies. They have become pseudo-democracies, in fact, controlled by large corporations and things like that. And that is essentially the where Shuddha Labh will lead us to, unbridled capitalism. Then what was the response of the society? In fact, if you look at Karl Marx and all of these people who wrote the Communist Manifesto and all of these things, they came in the 17th century Europe, in London, because they saw a lot of exploitation of workers and everything. So they developed the opposite view. Instead of Shuddha Labh, they said Shunya Labh, no profit. Everything should be communized. It basically should be socialized. And unbridled communism and socialism will lead to stifling of innovation and entrepreneurship. It will also lead to exploitation of the nature and humans. And as we saw see in China, North Korea, Cuba, USSR, all of these places, basically it will lead to dictatorships. India, which led the world with 25% of the world's GDP for 1.5 millennia, 1500 years, no country has done this. What was our model of economics? We did not talk about Shuddha Labh. We did not talk about Shunya Labh. We talked about Shubha Labh. Shubha Labh means profit for myself, but then the Shubha for the welfare for everybody else in the world. And when you have that kind of a check with the Dharma, which says no unbridled profit motivative, at the same time, don't sit and be lazy, make sure that you create wealth. When you have these two kind of things balanced well, there is no possibility of exploitation in a Bharatiya model. This is the perspective that the Jivana Drishti will bring on to the Jnana Parampara. This is transmitted on the Laukika Prayojana. You can see how big of an impact this can have, this kind of thought process can have on the economics, not just for India, but for the world. And then if you think about the personal level, what is it that we talk about? We are talking about today's model, we talk about GDP. And what is GDP based on? It is based on consumption. How much ever we consume, the GDP will go up. Now, what is the consumption based on? How big a car you have, how big a salary you make, how big a house you have, how many clothes you have purchased, how many things you have purchased, consumed. So that pursuit of consumption, unbridled pursuit of consumption, will basically lead to exploitation of the nature. And it talks about unlimited growth. But remember, I was talking about we are living on a constrained planet. We don't have too many unlimited resources. So how is unlimited growth possible on a limited planet? It is not going to be possible. We will have conflict with the nature. There will be societal discord because some people will have some things, some people will not have something. We are seeing this in the world today. Now, what was a Bharatiya model? We never said consumption is a model pursuit. We are talking about ananda. Personal happiness was the pursuit. So we always were saying, okay, if I have enough, that's if you think about it, this is the reason why you will see many of the Jain traders who are basically who have properties worth hundreds of crores, diamond traders from Surat and all. Many a times they will just go basically say, I'm done with this world, and then renounce everything and become a sannyasi. We have countless examples of such Rajarshis in our country who were at the pinnacle of power. They gave up everything and then went away. Why did they do that? They were pursuing ananda. And that leads to thriving with the nature and a growth that meets needs of all. And also will lead to societal harmony, because you see, now nobody is wanting to hold on to everything. We want to share, because that's how we will get happiness. And we want to thrive with the nature. And that is the kind of thing that Drishti will make when we talk about IKS. And that is what is the real contribution of the IKS. Even in healthcare, look at today's allopathy centric healthcare. What do we talk about? When do we go to a doctor? When we have a disease. Why? Because it's every medical system today in the world, especially the allopathy one, is basically about the treatment of a disease. And when you talk about disease centric treatment of a disease kind of a healthcare system, the healthcare becomes the responsibility of the individual, think through, and it will lead to expensive healthcare. Now, what is the Bharatiya perspective? Drishti of Ayurveda. In fact, the very first principle of Ayurveda says, Swasthasya swasthya rakshanam aturasya roga shamanam. So first is to protect the health of the healthy. We must pursue the health first. Swasthya of the healthy. So protect the healthy of the health of the healthy people so that they don't get into diseases. Therefore, Ayurveda does not only talk about treatment of diseases. It will also talk about how you should wake up, when you should wake up, what you should eat, what you should wear, how you should think. All of these things keep your mind mentally free. It talks about pranayama, yoga, all of these things. It's a whole complete package, because it is not about treatment of diseases. It is about protecting your health first and foremost. Then the other things come. So therefore, the society it becomes a societal responsibility, and basically leads to affordable personalized medicine too. And this is the philosophical level. But even at a practical, in the Jnana Parampara level, the approaches are different, because that flows through. If you look at Ayurveda, it takes a systems approach on Tridosha concept, basically which arise from the Pancha Mahabhutas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha are the Tridoshas. So because everything is made of plants, and animals are also made of the Pancha Tattvas, Pancha Mahabhutas. So the same framework can be applied, Ayurveda framework can be applied to Pashus, animals, and to Vrikshas, and basically to the plants as well. Therefore, you will have Ayurveda for humans, Pashu Ayurveda for animals, and Vriksha Ayurveda for basically trees and plants and all. Whereas reductionist approach is basically the pathway of the allopathy. I'm not saying that systemic approach is the only approach to take, or reductionist approach is to be discarded. Please note, I'm not saying that. I am saying both of them have their own benefits. Both of them have a place. It is about the perspective. So if I'm basically, let's say, in an emergency room with needing surgery, then I would definitely go to an allopathy doctor. But if I have a lifestyle disease and I want to protect my health, I would definitely go to an Ayurveda doctor. In fact, we all practice this. In fact, during COVID times, it was said, Dawavi, Kadavi. And Dawa is essentially nothing but allopathy. Kada is Ayurveda. We know how to blend these things. This is the perspective that IKS brings. And then basically, hopefully, I've shown you what is this uniqueness of the Drishti. And I'll just finish with few things here. Agriculture and trade were very important things, just to focus on agriculture and trade. And if you look at agriculture, confirmed evidence is there at least up to 10,000 years ago. First, basically, we domesticated wheat and barley. Then came ragi, tuar, chana dal, linseed, and cotton. Then finally came rice. And if you look at this kind of a system, when you look at it, agriculture in India is very much dependent on water. And because of that, we paid a lot of attention as a civilization for looking at the seasons, change in seasons. If you want to travel in oceans, you want to know when the wind is blowing, in which direction. And if you are an agriculture farmer, you want to know when is the rainfall coming. And therefore, we paid a lot of attention, and it was actually called Purva Chitti, something that you could predict even in Veda's time. And Shatapada Brahmana talks about the entire hydrologic cycle, says Agnirve Dhumo Jayate Dhumata Brahma Bhratrishti. And many such things are there. And therefore, it is no wonder that lot of rishis, Kashyapa, Parashara, Gautama, Vatsa, they all studied the rainfall prediction methods. And Varahamihira also discusses this in Brihat Samhita. And this is very similar to the kind of modern forecasting that we do. And if you look at some of the methods, it will look very astrological, but they are not astrological, they are astronomical. So, for example, the Krishi Parashara method says, okay, take the Shaka year, multiply it by 3, add 2, divide by 7, and find the remainder. Basically, you will get these 7 basically grahas: Surya, Chandra, Mangala, Buddha, Brahaspati, Shukra, Shani. And they will say scanty rainfall, heavy rainfall, scanty rains, good rainfall, all of these things. And it even talks about Adhaka, how many centimeters of rainfall you can get. This one, if you look at it, oh, there are Surya Graha, Chandra Graha, Mangala Graha. So this must be some kind of a Jyotishi, that astrological prediction. But this is not an astrological prediction. This is a astronomical correlation, empirical correlation of the astronomical observations with the 7-year cycles of the Indian monsoon, which happens in the Indian subcontinent. So Indian monsoon has 3-year, 5-year, 7-year, 12-year, 18 and a half year, and 60-year cycles, with sub cycles. This is actually talking about this. And this was 2,500 years ago. And you see, Brihat Samhita talks about another method where they are looking at different nakshatras and things like that. Okay. And we also talk about this famous verse, right? Ahimsa paramo dharma, ahimsa paramo dhamma. This one actually occurs in the context of preventing cruelty to animals in Mahabharata. This is answered by Bhishmacharya to basically Yudhishthira. And also talks about basically Krishi Parashara talks about how we should not be too cruel to our animals. Vahapidar jitam sasyam phalitam cha chaturgunam vahani shvasavatena. Then it all basically will be nashta. It will be nashta. It will be destroyed because of the exhaustion of the animals. And Kautilya also talks about strict measures for protecting the wild and the domestic animals, not just domestic animals, but also wild animals. And hunting of animals for entertainment was very strictly forbidden in our country. And you can see how all of these things blend. It's a multidisciplinary approach, a holistic approach, grounded in reality, and a big tradition of rigorous inquiry. And this is essentially what the Indian knowledge system is about. So you can see it expands into many things. So I can talk about the drishti, parampara, and laukika prayojana in health. I can talk about it in economics. I can talk about it in agriculture. I can talk about it in linguistics. I can talk about it in nyaya. I can talk about it in dharma shastras, all of these things. So everything is like that. So you actually have all of these things founded by the grounding of the triad of Jivana Darshana, Jnana, and the Vijnana. And where will you find the knowledge? So literary and non-literary classification, this is a very standard classification that you will see. So 14 core Vidyasthanas and other applied, basic and applied sciences, engineering, and all of the traditions, Buddhist, Jain, Sikh, and basically you'll see all the traditions there represented here. And art forms, in fact, much of the knowledge in the Indian knowledge systems is Maukika or non-literary. It has never been written down. It has been passed through oral traditions or in terms of artistic traditions and things like that. This is especially true for the Kalas. Shastras and Kalas are the two ways you can think about it. Shastras are typical codified sets of knowledge which can be written down, whereas the Kalas are much more hands-on skills that you acquire by practice. And in terms of the sources, there are primary sources, which are the original texts, and then the translated primary sources, translated into Hindi, English, or any of the other languages. Then there are secondary sources, which will actually talk about that and basically have commentaries and things like that. So again, the primary sources can be sutra text, which is an aphoristic text. Basically, that means like and then Bhashya is a commentary on it. Vartika is a text of revisions and rejoinders. Karika is a technical treatise, Vyakhya is a clause. Let me give you one simple example and you will understand it. So let's say we have Newton's laws of physics, motion. So we all know that. So if I just write only the Newton's laws of motion, that would be a sutra text. I'm just stating what those laws are 4 laws of thermodynamics. I just write them down. That is essentially the sutra. Now, in a textbook, that will not be sufficient. I have to explain it. That is a bhashya. So, like a textbook is an explanation of the sutra, that is a bhashya. Then there is always a first edition, second edition. Einstein came and then said Newtonian mechanics don't work. They work only under special conditions. So there was a rejoinder and a revision of the physics. That is like a Vartika. And then sometimes we all are familiar with the guidebooks, right? Which are numerical examples of solving the problems. That is a Karika. And Vyakhya is a gloss, right? So these are the kind of primary sources that you'll have. Manuscripts, books, research, papers, monographs, these are all the different types of resources, and locations can be many places. And whenever you work in IKS, you should really think about identifying an authentic source, primary source first, consult an expert, and make sure that you identify multiple secondary sources like peer-reviewed literature, bhashyas, vartikas, karikas, tika, commentaries and translation and things like that. And you should have evidence from multiple independent sources. Just to show you the agriculture I was discussing, right? We have a big system that was a Shastra in India. So all the way from 10,000 years before present, there, you see that there was an accelerated movement in agriculture around 800 BCE. So that's about 2,800, 2,900 years ago. And we see texts coming up. In fact, the very first text of agriculture in the world, entire world, is Krishi Parashara, at least 400 BCE. My guess is it is at least 600 to 800 or even 1000 BCE, but conservatively we can say at least 400 BCE. And then there is Kashyapiya, Krushi Sukti, Manas Ullasa, Vishwavallabha. There are all these other texts that you see coming up. So you see, the first one is Krishi Parashara, then Kashyapiya, Krushi Sukti. Chaudaraya wrote Lokopakara in 10,000 AD. And CE, and then Acharya Surapala wrote Vrukshayurveda around 1000 CE, and Upavana Vinoda by Sarangadhara in 13th century, Mrugapakshi Shastra in 14th century, Vishwavallabha in 16th century, Muskadar Fanni Falahat by Dara Shikoh in Farsi in 17th century, Krishi Gita in Malayalam by Parashurama in 17th century, so on so. So you see the entire lineage of the text, and everything is building on one top of other. That is essentially what a knowledge system looks like. And what is it that we do at the Indian Knowledge Systems Division? For us, this is essentially the core of what the Indian knowledge system is. And we are trying to rejuvenate and mainstream the Indian knowledge systems for the contemporary world. And our goal is to decolonize the Indian mind by generating interest and healthy critical reverence. We are not talking about superstitious, blind following of any text, even our text. In fact, one of our texts says, Purvam Aptopadeshat Jnanam Tatah Pratyaksha Anumanabhyam Upapajyate. That means first go to an unbiased teacher and learn the knowledge, get the knowledge, then make sure that you practice, you observe it in practice, and basically use your inference to establish that knowledge. And critical reverence for this unbroken knowledge traditions of Bharata for the welfare of the world. And these are all the interventions that we do, basically with AICTE, UGC, courses, faculty training, internships, national youth conferences, NCRT curriculum materials, knowledge resources, outreach, research proposals. All of these things are something that we do. These are some of our things that we have done in last 2.5 years. 53 centers, 88 research projects, more than 5,200 internships, so on and so forth. 80 plus FDPs, workshops and conferences, and 50 plus courses. You actually can find all the syllabi and the PI's names on our website. I will highly recommend that you visit our website, iksindia.org. And these are the resources that we can provide you: course materials, knowledge resources, the lecture notes for our standard IKS his workshops are put up on our website and are freely downloadable by anyone. And you can also sign up for our emails so that you can get more information about all the events that we do. And then we have talks by experts every month. We do training and networking of people. And our goal is to make sure that the teachers become acharyas. Teachers transfer information. Acharyas are epitomes of knowledge. We want you all to become like that. And 3 takeaways. understand, study, and add to the traditional wisdom, please. And IKS is not history studies. It is not limited to religious studies. Please note that point. And then what makes IKS unique is that Bharatiya Drishti, and it is inherently multidisciplinary, holistic in its approaches. And with that, the Twadharma Nishkama Karma for the Loka Sangraha. Loka Sangraha is essentially the welfare of the world, will lead to the Chaturtha Purushartha, that is a moksha. Atmano Mokshardham Jagathitaya cha, as the Swami Vivekananda ji said once. Dhanyavadaha. Namaste.
Thank you very much, sir, for delivering a insightful, informative, and thought-provoking lecture. Thank you very much, sir. So, would you like to take some questions from the audience?
Maybe we'll take one or two questions because I don't want to intrude into Professor Vishwajanani.
So we request participants, please raise
Just
your
one or two
digital
questions,
hand.
please.
If you have any, one or two we'll take.
I don't see any questions there.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, I'll look forward to
Bhrata
listening
Ranjan
to Vishwajanani.
Could you
Yeah,
please ask
namaste.
your question? Or Shivani ji? Could you please speak louder? Shivani ji? Last one. If we will try last one. Abhijit ji?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good
Yes.
afternoon.
Please proceed.
Sir, I have just attended another IKS FDP course. So my question, because very nicely you have portrayed the overview of the IKS. My question is that, as you have said that IKS is not the study of history, but it is a different perspective of Bharatiya.
Yeah.
But whenever we get into the texts of the Indian knowledge system, sometimes it feels like that these are generally manuals, and what practice has been done is way apart in that time. So there is a gap of understanding within myself.
Yeah.
So can you please touch this point? Because what I feel is that these are simply manuals, like idealistic thing, and what has been practiced. So
Abhijit ji, thank you for asking that question. I will answer it in two. One is, first, this thing is that the not understanding the terminology is a very natural thing, because we had a kind of a dormancy in the knowledge transmission traditions. So it is like, for example, looking at a 16th century alchemy text from Europe, you will have difficulties in the terminologies, because we don't know what the terminologies they had and things like that. So we'll have to make an effort to understand it. Fortunately for us, that is not a problem with the Indian knowledge systems. There is all the terminologies and everything, because it's such a consistent framework, we can easily get to that. But there, the language is not the only barrier. Many a times it is, these texts are written in Sanskrit or other Prakrit languages and things like that. But the problem is not just the language. It is also that it requires a lot of the technical domain knowledge. So, for example, if I'm looking at a Rasaratnakara, which is a chemistry text, I need to be a chemist to understand that text, because these are not generic texts. These are not popular science articles. They are highly technical content of a particular discipline. As an agriculture engineer, I can tell you that when I look at Vriksha Ayurveda, I mean, the amount of details that they have talked about, or Krishi Parashara, there is nothing else. It's all very technical text that is there. So we have to make some effort to understand the terminology first. That is one part. Then only that is where the domain knowledge really helps. So a chemist looking at a chemistry text will actually be much more easily understand the text than a Sanskrit professor looking at it. Yes, Sanskrit is a problem there, but learning Sanskrit is easier than learning those many years of chemistry. Similarly for maths text. So that is one part. And then the second thing you had said was these were probably some kind of ideal this thing. So I completely disagree with that. It was not some kind of an idealized thing. These were texts that were practiced. These were things, this was a codified knowledge of what was practiced. As I said earlier, you can differentiate it into two things, the Shastras and the Kalas. The Shastras were much more basically codified forms of the text. For example, the Ayurveda is a Shastra. So the texts of Ayurveda are not some theoretical models. They are actual things that are there, were practiced. And again, there is a difference in the Sutra text versus a Bhashya text versus a Karika and a Vartika and Tika. So that you'll have to keep in mind. So looking at a Sutra text, you cannot say that there is no explanation. There is no practical utility because you are not expected to find that there. That is not the purpose. That is written for experts, by experts. If you want to look at the practical aspects, look into Karika texts or a Bhashya, where they will explain with examples. So that is the kind of thing that we will have to look into. So I hope that answered your question there.
Would you like to have, sir?
Yeah, I think we'll stop there because I think we are running short of time. So we'll stop here and then we'll take it forward. Namaste, Vishwajananiji. Thank you so much for that patient thing. Thank you so much, Piyush. Namaste.
Yes. Well,
Thank you. Thank you. I think after really,
madam, your voice is very soft.
am I better?
No, very soft.
Anything better?
Anilji, could you please check once from your side?
Yes, yes, ma'am, you are audible. Yes.
Can any of the participants confirm that you can hear me? Very slow. Somebody is saying yes. Yes. Okay. I get a yes for an answer.
It's good. Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, I think after this really mind-blowing lecture by Professor Murthy, what I will be doing is just taking forward with some examples of ways all this Indian knowledge system lies and how can we as researchers and academicians get information of our Indian traditional knowledge. So just to, before I get into the actual presentation for today, I'd like to mention once again the program. So it's going to be a 5-day workshop. Every day you'll have to spend about 1.5 hours with us. This particular workshop focuses on traditional knowledge and the important aspects related to intellectual property rights as well as the people's rights will be discussed at length in the subsequent days. So it's from 20th to 23rd of August. Then you get a 3-day break, and on the 27th you will have the assessment. So please, all of you join us at 3:30 every day sharply on the link that has been sent by the IKS division. So what do we do in the traditional knowledge digital library? And you have had a very detailed presentation of the Indian Knowledge Systems division by Professor Murthy. So what we do in the traditional knowledge digital library is mainly to protect our Indian traditional knowledge from misappropriation. What does misappropriation mean? That somebody gives ownership rights on our knowledge as their own intellectual property rights. And that is what we do in terms of protecting our traditional knowledge. So you did get this information, right? We need to preserve our knowledge. We need to transmit our knowledge. We also need to be creative about our knowledge. So the other aspects of preservation is by means of protecting our own rights on our Indian traditional knowledge, and that is what the TKDL does. So it is a value-added database of Indian traditional knowledge currently focused on the Indian systems of medicine. We have a website. I request all of you to please visit the TKDL website for more information on what we do at the TKDL. So this workshop is, as I mentioned, planned over 5 days. So on the first day, we're just going to give you an overview on the expanse and significance of the Indian traditional knowledge. You've already heard a lot from Professor Murthy about the Indian knowledge systems and why it is important, along with the modern contemporary knowledge that we are gaining, because traditional knowledge is never static, it is dynamic, and it always answers the needs of that particular time. On the second day, you'll be learning more about the intellectual property rights from a very general perspective, specific case studies. On day 3 and day 4, we'll be talking about protecting traditional knowledge. So we'll be introducing new terminologies like defensive and positive protection of traditional knowledge. We'll also talk about the TKDL, what do we do in the TKDL, and so on and so forth. And on day 4, we'll be talking about the ethical aspects related to handling and working with traditional knowledge. It is very essential because, as Professor Murthy said, a large part of our traditional knowledge is more in the Kala form, that is oral traditional knowledge being transmitted from one generation to the generation by new word of mouth. On day 5, we'll tell you how TK-inspired innovations have a future and what is it that we as researchers and academicians need to look at. This particular day, you will also have the assessment and we'll close the workshop with that. So here we are talking about the expansive significance of traditional knowledge. As Professor Murthy mentioned, we had two major categories of traditional knowledge. One is the codified form of traditional knowledge. So you already have texts that talk about our ancient practices and knowledge as well. So right from the Vedas to the Upanishads to the Sahityas, you also have subject-wise books such as Charak Samhita, Shushrata Samhita, and then many other books related to Unani, to Siddha, to Sovarikva, even Yoga, Patanjali Yoga, and many other books. We also have many books that have already been mentioned by Professor Murthy, such as Vriksha Ayurveda, Krishi Parashara, Lokopakara, and many others for agriculture. In addition, we also have specific books for food, metallurgy, and many more. The importance of all of this is that, as you can see from this particular slide, the information is in our own regional languages. It could be in Sanskrit, it could be in Malayalam, it could be in Tamil, it could be in Telugu, Kannada, or even Hindi in the later years. And of course, when you talk of Unani, you have it in Arabic, Persian, Urdu, and many more. So this also very diverse. The uniqueness of our Indian traditional knowledge is well captured by these codified texts. The other very important part of our traditional knowledge is the oral traditional knowledge, that is the knowledge that has been transmitted from one generation to the other by mere word of mouth. So in these recent days, you have seen that many of these knowledge holders, it could be individuals, it could be communities, have all been recognized and rewarded. And the importance is that these practices are relevant even today, and that's the reason we are talking about oral traditional knowledge as a very important aspect of our Indian knowledge systems. Another very important category, in the earlier slide, what did I talk about? It was all about books. That is, you see those books in a printed form. But another form of our traditional knowledge and a form of codified traditional knowledge are the manuscripts. And under the Ministry of Culture, we have this National Mission for Manuscripts that have documented about 45 lakh manuscripts so far. And these are all digitized, that is, they are scanned and preserved. They are also protected from pests. And the National Mission of Manuscripts takes care of all these manuscripts. And why are these important? Because they are the storehouse of our traditional practices that has been transmitted to us by our ancestors. While the codified form, that is the manuscripts and as well as the books, are all a category that belongs to codified traditional knowledge, it's a very distinct category. Many of the manuscripts are not being converted into books. So only for a large proportion of the population, we look for books. Okay, and these are the books that are already there in public domain. So this is all public knowledge. But when you talk of manuscripts, they are either in private collections or in libraries and other places where it is not accessible yet to the public. So this part of traditional knowledge, this category of traditional knowledge, is codified traditional knowledge, but not in public domain. The oral traditional knowledge is again considered as secret and confidential traditional knowledge, sometimes secret traditional knowledge, based on the sensitivity associated with that particular community, or in terms of religion and other aspects as well. So the oral traditional knowledge is again a very important category of traditional knowledge which needs to be handled very carefully, because this knowledge happens to become the main means of livelihood to the people concerned. So we need to handle it very carefully. So on day 3, we will get to know more about how to handle oral traditional knowledge and what are the ethical aspects you'll get to know on day 4. So we'll start with the Indian systems of medicine. As many of you know, we have very distinct systems of medicine in the country. The classical systems of medicine are Ayurveda, Siddha, which is largely practiced in Tamil Nadu and as well as some parts of Kerala. And then you have Unani, largely practiced across the country. And also Soha Rigpa, which happens to be also called the Tibetan system of medicine, which has roots in Ayurveda. And this is largely practiced in the northern Himalayan regions of our country. And in TKDL, what we do is document this traditional knowledge with value add. You'll get to know about the details further on. But what we have is a huge collection of books. I'm talking of only books, talking about our Indian systems of medicine. And if you look at the TKDL website, you will get to know that we have covered over 645 such books, and we have almost close to 500,000 entries into the TKDL database that talks about only drug formulations, that is, it could be herbal formulations or herbal mineral formulations, and this is the vastness and diversity of our Indian systems of medicine. I think all of you have heard of Charak Samhita and Shushrit Samhita. The saints Charaka, the sages Charaka and as well as Shushita had excelled in the fields of medicine, and in terms of surgery, I think Shushita had made a mark because the first plastic surgery is supposed to be brought out by Shushita. So I just give you an example of Jivaka, again a physician to Lord Buddha, just to kind of say that when we are talking of systems of medicine, it is not limited to only Charaka or Shushruta. It has many more sages and acharyas who have been associated with the systems of medicine. So Jivaka happens to be the physician to Lord Buddha, and he is known for creating the nasyas, that is the draught for the nostrils, that is as a treatment for headaches. In fact, he was the one who treated King Bimbisara of hemorrhoids, and in this particular case, he ensured that the medicine, the herbal medicine, was put under the nails and used medical ointments just to treat the fistula. Jivaka is also known for having the brain surgery done for the first time. He, this was a case of the wife of a particular businessman who had repeated headaches and, had visited many Vaidyas to see what was the problem with the headaches. None of them could identify what exactly was the problem. They gave her a lot of medications, but she was not cured of it. So finally, when the businessman meets Jivaka agrees to go and see his wife, and he realizes there are worms in the brain, and he does a brain surgery, Jivaka, and removes the 2 large worms from the brain of that woman. Jivaka also happens to treat King Pratyot for his pernicious anemia, that is a Pandu disease. And this particular case, the story goes that King Pratyot was very averse to taking anything related to ghee. But this particular medication needed the use of ghee, and Jivaka created the kashaya with ghee and gave that to the king, who was then cured of the Pandu disease. It also happens that, as the stories go, that Jivaka was also very closely associated with Lord Buddha. And at one point of time, Lord Buddha had blocked intestines because of the accumulation of toxins. All that Jivaka did was give him 90 rounds of mild purgation, along with a handful of lotuses to inhale the essence from the emanating plants, and Lord Buddha was cured of the blocked intestines. So there are acharyas who have done great in terms of not only practicing the Ayurveda, but also passing on to the next generation, so that we have been the inheritors of such valuable information. So I'll just go into a little bit of details about the Ayurveda. All of us know that gooseberry, that is amla, is a very important plant in the country. In Ayurveda, amla is considered to be a very, very important and extensively studied plant because it balances the tridosha, that is the vata, pitta, and kapha. So amla is used as a fresh fruit pulp as well as a dried fruit pulp, and what you also get to know is that this particular amla, whether it is the fresh fruit or the dried fruit, is known to largely cater to Rakta Pitta, Amla Pitta, Prameha, and Daha. Basically, in terms of its properties such as the immunity enhancer or as a rejuvenative tonic, or it can also have therapeutic effects in terms of diabetes control, as a laxative for improving eyesight, and of course maintaining hair and skin health, among various other things. The beauty of our systems of medicine can be further appreciated by taking two different examples. When we talk of Triphala, I think many of you might have heard of the the Ayurvedic formulation Triphala, which is a mixture of three fruits, and that is Amla, Vividaki, and Haritaki. Depending on the carrier, the use of that particular Triphala varies. For example, if I use Triphala with sugar, it is used for acid peptic disease. If I use it in oil, it is for non-healing ulcers. If I take it with ghee and honey, it is supposed to improve the eyesight. And if we take it with rock salt, it is for the vata diseases. So depending on the carrier, the use of Triphala varies, and the same drug has multiple uses. When I talk of one single ingredient, that is Godichi, that is Tinus parapaltifolia, yet again, if I take it with ghee, that is Brita, it is used for Vata Vitara. If I take it with castor oil, that is Erendathaila, it is used for Vata Rakta diseases. Similarly, if I take it with jaggery, it is known for treating Vidhanga. Or if I take it with honey, it is for Kapha Vikara. So a same drug, a single drug, depending on the carrier, has diverse activities and is used for treating different disorders. If I talk of one particular disease, so here I take an example of vitiligo. Okay, vitiligo is a skin disorder where the melanocytes have been lost and it forms patches of skin. It is a social stigma for those who have vitiligo because there are patches across maybe your face, your hands, your legs, and different body parts. But when we talk of the Indian systems of medicine, there are so many diverse, treatments available, formulations that are available to treat that one single disease, that is vitiligo. You take of Ayurveda, you have decoctions of ficus, Histidia, Pterocarpus marsupium, and various other herbal medicines, ingredients that can treat vitiligo. Similarly, is the case with Unani, Siddha, homeopathy, and others, including the local treatments such as red clay found by the riverside. It is mixed with ginger juice, and sometimes radish seeds with vinegar are used for treating vitiligo, and so on and so forth. So I gave an example of Buddha being treated with lotus flowers. So Jivaka gives Buddha along with all the other medications. He says, you smell the lotus and then you will be treated of your blocked intestines. I'd like to draw your attention to say that Pushpa Ayurveda is a distinct category within the Ayurveda. Okay, and this was actually first created by, I believe, a Jain physician. A treatise was brought out by a Jain physician called Vidyacharya. It is known by the name of Kalyana Karaka. It's an old Carnatic script, and it provides a preparation of many different rasayana medicines and covering almost like 18,000 different kinds of flowers. So there are ways by which flowers are used for treating as for therapeutic purposes as well as for health and wellness. So one is the darshanam. Just by concentrating on at the flower, there are treatments available. Say, for example, if I talk of Rakta Mandara, that is hibiscus, it is used for Vata Roga joint pains. If I look at yellow marigold, it is used for Pitta Jwaras. Similarly, this is Sparsha Vidhanam. Sparsha Vidhanam is like advice to bathe. That is, you have to touch the plants So you can use it as a cap, you can use it as a bracelet, or you can even lie down on a bed of flowers. That forms the Ayurveda way of treating different affiliations of the human health. The other one is the Alepana Vidhanam, where it is like, flowers are either singly or mixed with some other medicated drugs, ground into a pulp, and it is applied on the body. It is Alepana. The other one is the Akshana Vidhanam or Nasya Vidhanam. So you smell. Nasya is basically anything to do with these nostrils. So it is smelling process or nasal drops, where you can use flowers with mild smell, medium smell, madhya, or tivra, where it has super strong fragrance, and Nirgandha, which is odorless. And typically, the Pushpa Ayurveda has 12 different categories depending on how the particular flowers is used for therapeutic purposes. It could be rasa, it could be hima. Rasa is basically by taking the extract by crushing the flowers. Hima is by soaking it in water and then taking the essence out. Vata is the decoction created. Arka is the distilled extract. Sura is the tincture, and so on and so forth. So there are different ways flowers have been used in Ayurveda for treating human afflictions and as well as for health and wellnesses. Talking of, when you're talking of flowers, so most of us use flowers even to decorate ourselves, put it in our hair and other things. Okay, so we have been very beauty conscious since our, olden times, I guess, and traditional cosmetics finds a very, very important place in Indian knowledge systems. So there are different books that talk about the traditional cosmetics. It could be the facial cosmetics, it could be oral hygiene, it could be depilatories, it could be body cosmetics or cosmetics for the hair. All of this is covered in many, many books. What I'm showing here is only a few books, that we could include it in a slide, but there are many more such books available for all those interested in this subject matters. So, for example, when I talk of Ashtanga Hridaya, okay, it is a very important book in Ayurveda. It talks about treating pimples. So here, the piece of Prasita's Rota, Kustumdhara and Vacha are used for pimples on the face. Similarly, there is a premature graying of hair. Bringaraja, Triphala, and Krishna Mritika is used along with the juice of sugarcane. And once it is applied onto the hair, it helps in preventing premature graying of hair. Similarly, for hair growth promotion also, there are formulations that are being mentioned where Mamsi, Kushta, Krishna Daina, Sarika, and Nilotala are made into paste with milk, and Hagini is added and it is applied to the hair for promoting good hair growth. So, cosmetics, when we talk of cosmetics, it's not just to do with the face and now what is that, the hair growth and other things, right? It has also got to do with good hygiene, and traditional perfumery has held its place even in our ancient times. When we talk of Varahamita's Brihat Samhita, there are distinct stanzas that have been mentioned on traditional perfumery. One is the Gandhiyukti, the other one is the Gandharnava, which is the ocean of perfumes that can be made. So in the Shloka 10, it talks about perfumes that can be made, almost like 3.7 lakh options that can be prepared by using 9 ingredients. And what are they made of? Haritaka, Shankha, Dhana, Rasa, Valaka, Jaggery, Kosar, Shaileya, and Musta seeds. And what they also say is that how one part of Harita, they are different. The permutations and combinations can be made such that we can use all the 9 substances, and any particular substance can be used into similar proportions. So when you keep on doing these permutations and combinations, by using these 9 ingredients, we can come to about 3.6 lakh different combinations of perfumes. Similarly, when I talk of Shloka 13 and 14, it talks about the perfume motion. And here what they do is that they take about 16 ingredients. They have identified 16 ingredients. You can take any 4 of those ingredients, and when you mix it in such a way that each of the 4 substances can be mixed from 1 to 4 parts, and the number of mixtures will be very large. So here the permutations and combinations by providing looking at this particular table is about 1.7 lakh such perfume combinations that can be prepared. And when we talk of such herbal formulations that can be used for multiple purposes, be it for human health or for human beauty products or similar such, or even so for that matter the perfumery, agriculture happens to be important because unless you have good ingredients, good raw material, you will not see the effect it is supposed to create. So our Asian traditional knowledge from India also covers very rigorous traditional agricultural practices. In fact, Parashara says, that Sustha Bhavanti Krishaka Dhanadhanya Samriddhaha, may the farmers be happy, healthy, and wealthy. So when you look at all the different books that even Professor Murthy mentioned, right from Krishi Parashara to Kautilya Arthashastra to Brihat Samhita, and to very specific books like Manasa Sallasa or Vriksha Ayurveda or Gopakara, we have different books that talks about different aspects of agriculture, right from testing the soil to looking at the weather conditions to identify which plant needs to be planted at what time, and how should it be maintained, watering intervals, everything is mentioned in that. So even recently, in terms of our Indian Council for Agricultural Research, that is ICR, Assisted Institute for Agriculture, we see such an organization for agriculture. They have brought out 7 volumes of traditional knowledge inventory on agriculture. It is called the Indigenous Technical Knowledge in Agriculture. And each of the books lists out all these local practices that have been made by the farmers at different parts of our country, and these have all been documented. Not only that, two of the texts, they talk about the cross-sectoral validation of the indigenous traditional knowledge. In fact, the very recent one of 2020 talks about 38 validated ITKs that include 23 cross-validated, cross-sectoral validated practices, and 15 of them are single-center experiments. Not only that, in terms of today's context, even Prasamurthy mentioned, and I also keep repeating that traditional knowledge is never static; it is always dynamic. In today's context, we need to see how do we protect all our land races as well. And geographical indications happens to be one very important intellectual property tool wherein we can protect our plant species in addition to the plant varieties and Farmers' Rights Act. So the ITK related technical documents also cover the geographical indications of the plant species. So there is wealth of information. So I'll just give you one particular example of Punamshala from our traditional agriculture, which is deemed as the oldest fermented liquid organic manure. So Krishi Parashara talks about Punamshala and also Vriksha Ayurveda talks about Punamshala, and here it is mentioned as a fermented biofertilizer and growth promoter. The original text, they talk about Punamshala made from animal bones, marrow, blood, all the waste from the farmer's house and as well as the field. And they are mixed with sesame cake, germinated urad bean, rice husk, honey cake. It is fermented and used in the field. So this fermented liquid organic manure is being indicated to promote plant growth and as well as the productivity of the plant. With time, things changed, and as I keep saying, traditional knowledge is always dynamic. The herbal Punamshala was developed in the year 2004, and later on, completely herbal Punamshala was developed in the year 2012, which used weeds, to provide for fungicidal and insecticidal properties as well. So this Asian Agri-History Foundation, which has been dealing and documenting all these traditional practices, including translations of our traditional texts, they had used the herbal Punamshala across various fields, across various crops, including vegetables, fruits, field crops, and tea. And they saw that by using Punamshala, the productivity increases by 20 to 30%. So this is the kind of wealth that we have inherited from our ancestors and needs to be respected. As I said, when we are talking of our traditional knowledge, it's not the static information, right? We need to see how we can use that to our current needs. So when you talk of Kunamchala, at one point of time it was considered as nothing important, but this time we understood that Kunamchala is actually called the filthy liquid, or or it is also called, sorry. Yeah, as the filthy liquid that has emanated from the farmer's field. And there was information that Kunamchala can be used as a fertilizer. But later on, Vriksha Ayurveda, these are all mentioned in Vriksha Ayurveda, Lokupakara, Sarantadhara Paddhati, Vishwaballabha, and so on and so forth. But in today's terminologies, in today's world, we see many more combinations and variations of the Kunamchala. One is the in safari. This is the Kunamchala made out of the safari fish in cow urine. Mushika Kunamchala is the rats in cow urine. Kukuta Kunapa is the chicken flesh that has been used. These are all waste from the farmer's field. Sarangadhara Kunamchala talks about the animal waste of different animals, deer, pig, sheep, goat, and others. And also fish is boiled in water and comforted milk, and then it is fermented. So Shashagavya, which is basically cow dung, cow urine, wheat, and other fat part. So when you look at all the recent studies, scientific studies that have been done, if you look at the method given by Narayanan, he talks about the Mushika Kunamchala, and which has been validated. Similarly, is the method given by Ali. So everybody has looked as to how they have developed or created a process for making the Kunamchala. They have tested it on the field and see that all these Kunamchalas have resulted in increase in the productivity of the plants. So this is one example of how our traditional agriculture practices are still being of relevance in today's context as well. The other one that typically happens is how to improve seed germination, because if in case there is a seed with very hard, very hard, it becomes very difficult for us to germinate those seeds. So here is an example from the Vriksha Ayurveda that talks about how seeds with the very hard pericap can be facilitated for germination. So what they do is that they take the seeds and mix it with triphala and as well as sesame, barley, and black gram. They soak it along with turmeric, and this helps in the germination of the seed. We have also heard about the grafting of plants. Okay, here is one particular example for Varahanira's Brihat Samhita, and here what they have done is they use grafting of trees on others so that the trees can be transported from one country to the other. So for that, what have they done? For grafting, they have speared from root to the stem with ghee and a coupon, sesame, honey, vidanda, milk, and powder, and they've been able to successfully transport the plants from one country to the other and also help it grow in the new place. So these are all the methods that have been mentioned in our traditional texts and which are of relevance today. So I think what calls for is our interest and further studies to see how we can use it for our current needs. So one example from animal husbandry, because when we are talking of agriculture, if we don't touch upon animal husbandry, it is going to be a way. So I talked about the oral traditional knowledge. So far, we have touched a lot about what's there in a codified text, what is the information that we have had from those texts and all that. But traditional knowledge also cover the oral practices as well. So here is an example that from one of the texts from the ICR inventory that talks about the indigenous practices. So there's Navpada district in Orissa, where in a particular village called Makarpini, the farmers use harita and berida powder to treat the foot and mouth disease in cattle. The foot and mouth disease is a prevalent disease in the cattle. And people find it very hard to kind of prevent such disease in the cattle. So the only option is once the animals get it, you have to treat it. This particular method was validated by none other than the Department of Veterinary Medicine by the West Bengal University of Animal and Fisheries Sciences, Kolkata, along with the organizer KBK of Kalahanty. So what they have done is that they have taken 5 different groups, and each group has at least minimum 7 cows in it. So the first group is the untreated control. The second one is called the ITK method, wherein the harita and bajeta powder is used along with water. Then you have another group that is treated with root parts of Kerala tree. The fourth group is where only neem oil is applied, and the fifth group is the conventional treatment, that is Vaxivate. So what these scientists have found is that this ITK method of using harita and beta was as effective as in controlling this foot and mouth disease in the cattle, foot cows, and buffaloes. The only difference is that the animals took 5 to 6 days to recover by using the ITK method, whereas by using the conventional Vaxivate, in 4 to 5 days, the treatment would be brought in. So when you talk of cost economics and other things, you can see that the ITK method would be far better than the conventional method. While I say this is not to kind of say that we should not use conventional therapy. It is just to kind of highlight that when you are talking of traditional practices, they do have their relevance even today. So another example is of the aquatics. When we're talking of banana pseudostem in fish pond, it is about increasing or enhancing the productivity of fish. Banana pseudostem has been used. So what have they done? Again, this is a particular method that has been used in Orissa in the Berhampur district, and what they do is that, Balasore district, and 80% of the farmers follow this practice. They add the banana pseudostems to the fish ponds and they cut it longitudinally. And what it is supposed to do is that increases the alkalinity so that, reduce the alkalinity so that the fishes grow in that particular water. So what they do is that they have added this one, what is that? Along with the pseudostems, they have added to the pond after cutting it, and we found that this particular water is rich in minerals. It increases the pH so that the hardness and alkalinity of the pond water is maintained. It helps in precipitation of suspended matters in water and reduces the turbidity, and also increases the oxygenation. So they found that using this particular pseudostem, there is 4 different groups that have been created. One is no treatment, that is the control. Then another group where the pseudostem has been used at 2000 kg per hectare. The third one was, and it was the pseudostem was allowed to decompose. Here in the third group, the pseudostem was added for a few days and then removed, and then they checked that particular activity in terms of the productivity of fish. And the fourth one was the use of lime. And they found that the ITK method is as good and a low-cost solution to increasing the productivity of fish. And when we are talking of the aquatic species and water, it also becomes important to understand what is our Indian knowledge systems talking about water conservation methods across India, depending on what kind of land it is, whether it is the plains or it is the highlands or the hill ranges or the valleys. There have been water conservation methods very typical to that particular region, and appropriate structures and methods have been created to align with the climate, the rainfall, the geographical region, as I mentioned, the soil and local materials as well. So if I talk of the Trans-Himalayan, especially the Ladakh area, they talk about sinks. When I talk of the Brahmaputra Valley, they are ponds constructed by the communities. Sometimes there are small irrigation channels that are created. If I talk of the islands, there are pits that are created so that the rainwater is collected and is used for purposes of life. So when you talk of the more complex or architecturally beautiful conservation methods, even during the Mohenjo-daro days, you have these step wells that have been created, especially in the Gujarat and Rajasthan areas. You have beautiful step wells even now. And these are all talking about how water has been conserved, especially the rainwater, so as to ensure that the water needs of the community, the population is taken care of. Talking of water, agriculture, and all that, if we talk of food and nutrition, it would be a very logical way of moving forward. So again, when we talking of food and nutrition, there are specific books that are available on our Indian knowledge systems, such as the Pakadarpanam of Maharaja Nagla, Supashastra by Mangarasa, Bhojana Kutuhala by Raghunatha Ganesha, and Kshema Kutuhala by Kshema Sarma, and so on and so forth. So just give you an example as to how the content of a particular book would look like. If I talk of Kshema Kutuhala, there are 12 chapters, that is Utsavas mentioned. Okay? The first chapter talks about the 7 times of Dravya Pakas. The second one talks about the utensils. The third one talks about the qualities of the physician and as well as the cook. The fourth one talks about the seasons and the routines to follow. Then you might have heard about Ritacharya, Dinacharya, right? So these are all the things that I have also mentioned in the Kshema Kutuhala. So the fifth one is the daily routine. Sixth one is talking about meat, food, cooking of fishes. The seventh one, eighth one talks about the different types of vegetables. The ninth one is focused on preparations from flowers. The 10th one is about the foodstuffs have been described. 11th chapter talks about appetizers. The 12th chapter talks about the dairy products and other things. So this is the kind of the vastness, the diversity, and as well as the expanse of our Indian knowledge systems, be it in different fields. Just to give again an example from Pakadarpana, they talk about a particular preparation with. It is called the soup. That is dal, how the dal has been made. And it talks about, not only about creating the dal, but for what purposes it is used. So the left-hand side, the Supanan Nirmana Vidhi, it talks about a preparation of a soup that is good enough for a king to consume. So that is the kind of food preparations that are mentioned. So when I talk of another example, that is the Krishna Kuratiras Bharanika Vedi, it talks about preparing this particular dal from Krishna Kurati, and it also says that this particular dal is used not only for good nutrition, but also in terms of keeping away diseases such as from any particular regard. It could, and here in this particular case, it is the kapha. So there are foods that are mentioned for just good nutrition, but also foods that have been meant for therapeutic purposes as well. When we talk of food, it is also important to understand how utensils have been used, what have been the eating formats, and so on and so forth. Here, I don't talk of a particular old book, but I'm here talking about Indian traditional way of eating, where it could be a leaf, it could be a plate, and what kind of trees have been used. So, for example, if I talk about plantain leaf, which is even now being used largely in the South India, it is not only a cordial way of providing food, but it's also used to stimulate the digestive fire, useful in dieters and thought, and so on and so forth. If I use the bustard teak plant, it is used to alleviate vata and kapha diseases, including treating ascites and abdominal tumor. If I use the castor bean leaf, it is used for alleviating vata and kapha, it kills worms as well, and so on and so forth. Again, I repeat, this is to kind of give you a glimpse of how vast and diverse our traditional knowledge is, and it has to be seen how we can use this in our current to meet our current needs and how to keep the knowledge systems alive. So when we talk of metallurgy, it is very important to recognize that India excelled even in the field of metallurgy. And two particular examples that I'd like to draw your attention is the wood shape. In today's terminology, we talk about high-grade, ultra-high carbon shape, right? And this wood shake is nothing but that. So what do they do? How do they do it? It is by a particular tribe in South India. It is called the steel as well. It is prepared by making porous iron. It is hammered while it is still hot, and the slag is created. Then to the slag, what they do is that they seal it with wood chips in the clay container. and then we heat it again. So what happens is that when this particular carbon is deposited in the iron, it forms a uniform composition of 1 to 1.6% carbon in that particular heat. And this particular steel, for the wood steel, has been used for making of the famous Damascus swords as well. So the steel used to be exported from the country, and then the Damascus swords were made. The Damascus swords are very famous for the fact that the sword can be used to cut a scarf as easily as the head of the prisoner or the enemy. So that is the kind of the technologies that we excelled in. Yeah, similarly, you see alloys. I just give you an example from the bronzes of Kerala. The Aranmala mirror. When you talk of mirror, what do we think? It is a glass mirror, right? We would like to see a reflection. So in Kerala, there is a particular mirror called the Aranmala mirror. It is a metal mirror. So it's not made of glass. So here the metal contains the alloy is tin, zinc, phosphorus, iron, and nickel and copper. Till date, it is only that particular community or family who's been making Taranmala mirrors since ages still are able to create this particular mirror. Many educational institutions have tried repeating this, but they have not been able to. They have not been successful in recreating the Aranmala mirror as good as that of the artisans who are involved in the trade. Then there is these bronzes of Kadavallur, Eating Bowl, and as well as Swamimalai and Manna icons, wherein very specific metallurgical processes have been used. In the Kadavallur heating bone, the bronze is made by, the alloy is made by thermomechanical process. Whereas when we talk of Swamimalai or Manna icons, the lost wax process is used. So each of these techniques, each of the bronzes or brass alloys that have been created have their own uniqueness, and this is again talks about the expanse of our Indian knowledge systems across diverse areas, subject areas, and how it can be used to meet the requirements of today as well. Even in architecture, I don't have to explain this line because you see many temples across the country which have beautiful architectures and that can stand firm. So I'm just giving you one example of the Tanjavur Bradeshwar temple, where it is, not only in terms of the architectural beauty, but also in terms of the idols with it, and as well as inscriptions that have been created on the wall. Whoever is interested in this particular architecture of Bradeshwar temple, I would urge you to visit the IKS-TKDL Indira Gandhi National Culture National Center for Arts. You can visit their website. You will have a beautiful multimedia presentation on the Bradeshwar temple. So every part of the temple has been mapped to the relevance and significance that it provides for. Talking of infrastructure, it's not just for architecture, but also in terms of sustainability. Many of our traditional systems have been used for example, if you talk of just mud, using mud, there is a mud monastery in the Spiti Valley of Himachal Pradesh, which was built in the 10th century. It now stands tall. It has been made of raw earth, water, and fibrous materials like straw. And inside of the monastery, you have even now the frescoes, that is mural paintings, and the tankas, that is small paintings adorning the walls. And this is called the Ajanta of the Himalayas. All of you might have heard about the Bhuj tragedy in 2001 in Gujarat, right? So here, after this calamity, they had to rebuild the place. So the traditional Dunga architecture was used. And what is it? What does the Dunga architecture constitute? It is about mud bricks used to make a circular plan structure. And instead of the structure, tree branches are used with mud. Sometimes we use it, wooden or ring beams to kind of support the structure. And 1,400 houses were built, Kundas were built to kind of provide the Bhuj victims for houses to live in. This particular model was also used in after the Kosi floods in Bihar. Two model villages with about 15,000 houses were built, and the policy facilitated about 1 lakh houses later on. So our architecture or infrastructure or even our traditional methods is not to say that they are old and are only of, what do you say, heritage value, but it is also to see how we can adopt it to our contemporary needs. So when we are talking of, the cultural expressions, art and culture also happens to be a very important aspect of our heritage. I mean, there are different forms of arts, in our country. Just to kind of, talk about a few things. This particular slide is very busy. But they say that 52 incredible Indian art forms have been protected in Indian art culture. So every community or region in the country has been mapped to a particular art form. Even dance and music has not only been used only for entertainment purposes, but also to cover social and societal themes. Say, for example, the Yakshagana of Karnataka is used to create environmental consciousness as well. And I think the recent movie Kantara speaks very much about not only the environmental consciousness, but also the people's rights. Bharatanatyam has been used since ages to kind of, touch upon the human rights as well as the societal themes. And here, even in recent times, we see many of such performances touching upon very important societal aspects of our life. Music has been used as a therapy as well. So there are several studies that have proved that music is an effective therapeutic tool as well. So all of this, when we are talking about knowledge systems, it is important to understand that language happens to be a very, very important aspect, because why be it the codified form or the oral traditional now means it is a communication. Language is a tool for communication, and it is really very sad that we are losing out many of our old languages. In fact, many of the manuscripts that are mentioned by the National Mission for Manuscripts are yet transcribed or not translated yet, because we do not have those language experts in the country now. Maybe they are very few and we are not able to reach out to them. So the government has taken a conscious decision to rejuvenate and protect these languages. And the Ministry of Tribal Affairs have identified and listed about 82 language minors that need to be protected by the state governments. And this is one. The slide talks about that. So in all of this, when we are talking of the languages or the cultural expressions or even the traditional knowledge and the practices, it is important to understand that our ancient systems of education and the books that we see, they all talk about very standard terminologies. And these are a few that I have listed here. Tarka Vidya, that is a science and art of logic and debate. We have always used logic and debate in specifying practices, and also coming up even in terms of Shastras and other. Vada Vidya, it is the art of discussion. Sadhya is a thesis which is to be established. Siddhanta is a proposition or conclusion. Hetu is an example. Udharana, examples have been used very categorically in many of our texts. So some of the examples are Sadharmya, which is an affirmative example. Vaidharmya is a negative example. Pratyaksha is a perception. Anumana is inference. Pramana is proof. So much of our systems of education from the early times talks about all these important aspects, where even in terms of Nyaya Sutra, there are three kinds of debates that are being mentioned. That is Katha, where there is a thesis and a counter thesis argued by the protagonist based on evidence and argument. The second one is Jalpa, which talks about equivocation, that is ambiguous language and false reasoning, just to keep your protagonist at bay. The third one is the Vitenda. You argue, but there is no counter thesis because you're not able to provide for evidence and argument. even in terms of the Jatak that is a little later in time, there are 64 colors that are taught to the students, and the subjects include music, dance, culture. But very strangely, it also, or interestingly, it also includes metallurgy, armor making, stone working, leather working, carpentry, shipbuilding, and rope making. So it is not just important to be a good academician, but it was also very important to impact the other aspects of our cultural expressions as well. So to quickly kind of close my talk, I'd like to again emphasize that when we're talking of the Indian knowledge systems or the traditional knowledge of India, it is to understand that the basis have been strong. We talk of Nyaya, Pramana Shastra, that is the science of correct knowledge. We also talk about knowing, that is knowledge based on 4 conditions, that is subject or pramatra, object of prameya, cognition of pramiti, or nature of knowledge, or the pramana. So the 4 pramanas for acquiring correct knowledge is indicated to be pratyaksha, that is direct perception, anumana, that is inference, upamana is analogy, or shabda, or verbal testimony. Even in books like Charaka Samhita, Shushruta Samhita, logic rationalization has been indicated as a very important aspect. And in fact, Shushruta says a physician who has learned only one science is not good to be a physician. He can be a good physician only when he understands even about the medicinal plants. So interdisciplinary science has been a very, very important aspect in our traditional knowledge. And whilst the IKS division and the TKDL unit working together to do all this that we have done over this a little more than an hour, I would say today, it is because our national education policy as well as the national intellectual properties policy, they all talk about our traditional knowledge. Professor Murthy gave you an example as to how important that the knowledge of India will find its place in the school curriculum as well as the higher education curriculum. And it also talks about the ethno-medicinal practices, forest management, and many more. Whereas when we talk of the innovation policy, that is the other vertical, the other extreme vertical of our educational of our education. The vision statement of the national IPR policy also talks about traditional knowledge and biodiversity resources. And TKDL happens to be a very important component of the IPR policy, wherein it says that we need to include other fields as well, and also document oral traditional knowledge. So people who have joined from the academic background, we need to understand that the UGC as well as the ACT have specific guidelines that talks about IKS courses in the both UG and PG programs, and it talks about for example, the guidelines of the UGC talk about IKS courses. It is 5% of the total mandated credits are to be taken care under the UGC guidelines. Whereas the ACT talks about 18 credits in IKS courses, and the mandatory courses will be included as part of this 18 credits. And here, the 3-week student induction program will include a mandatory program that talks about Indian culture and civilization. I'll not touch upon the Indian Knowledge Systems Division because we have heard it from Professor Murthy. They offer internships, they also offer research grants, and they also offer grants to set up IKS centers for initiating research, education, and outreach activities in the IKS. So I would request all of you to join hands in protecting, preserving, and promoting our traditional knowledge systems of India for the better livelihood of our own countrymen as well as the local population. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we have together overshot our time, but here we are.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for giving this informative lecture as you did always. It's a, in what word? It's a Bharata Tirtha you showed us. So we'll not spend time. I just sharing the link in the chat box.
So you announced, I think the link, yeah.
See.
I request all
It's
of you to please,
7:18.
please pay attention to the link shared for your assessment.
Yes.
You can thank me later. You can thank the speakers later. You can thank the organizers later. Please.
So you are given 10 minutes. It's 17:18. So before 17:30, 5:30, we'll close the link. We request all of you, please submit your assessment before that to be on the safe side. Then we can take one or two questions, ma'am, is if you permit. So we can just make silence for 10 minutes. 2 minutes left. Please submit your assignment. Pranam, madam. Namaste to all of you. If you have any queries, any questions, please raise your hand, digital hand. We can take some questions. Namaste, Pratibha ji. Yes.
Yes.
Namaste, Yogesh ji. Could you please ask your question?
सर नमस्ते सर मैं ये कहना चाह रहा कि अगली जो सेशन होंगे सभी वो हिंदी में हो सकते हैं क्या सर आई अंडरस्टैंड योर इंग्लिश बट फॉर ऑल पार्टिसिपेंट्स वी डिमांडिंग इन एक्सप्लेन इन हिंदी
We'll try in future. We can make.
क्योंकि साउथ से बहुत लोग ज्वाइन करते हैं ना, तो इसीलिए इंग्लिश का मीडियम यूज कर रहे हैं। शायद फ्यूचर में हिंदी यूज कर पाएंगे, पर अभी के लिए वी आर ट्राइंग टू मैनेज इट मोस्टली इन इंग्लिश, जस्ट काइंड ऑफ एडहियर टू टाइमलाइंस, नहीं तो टाइम लगेगा इसीलिए, और कुछ नहीं।
ओके मैम, थैंक यू मैम, थैंक यू।
थैंक यू।
हेलो, नमस्ते मैम।
नमस्ते
मैम, मेरा प्रश्न ये है कि अगर ये IKS एजुकेशन में मतलब कि हम लोग शामिल कर रहे हैं, तो कैसे इसके लिए हम कोर्स डिजाइन करें, जिससे ग्रेजुएशन में, पोस्ट ग्रेजुएशन में।
Piyush, do you want to mention?
IKS has one of the initiatives where that is Shikshaka Prashikshana Kendra. Through that initiative, you can apply. Then you can make IKS courses according to the guidelines. Astu, that's an opportunity. Whenever it will come, please, I request you, please apply. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question. Namaste, sir. Namaste, ma'am. So basically, like in IKS, like I see that there are many centers which has been coming up in the higher education institutes, but then how we are targeting to get some research work done in PhD or in MS. So is it like I mean, when I see Indian knowledge system through a lens, it is quite very large. And where should we target? I mean, going ahead, what is the vision or the mission where we are progressing towards? So where should we progress toward?
See, well, we had presented under the IKS division, we are providing for research grants. One is the ignition grants to kind of get people to start doing research for the first time in the IKS subject matters. The second one is for the experienced people to kind of establish new line of thought along the lines of the TK or on the basis of TK. So that is something that you can look at. But while I say that, IKS is not something new. It's been happening in the country for many ages. There are many professors who have done a lot of research work in IKS areas. I can talk of IIT Kanpur, I can talk of IAC, I can talk of different IITs, including Chennai and Bombay and many other places and many central universities as well. When we talk about medicines and all that, we have a Ministry of Ayush also. Okay, so there are several ways where you can find relevant PhD supervisors to do your research. But if in case there is any particular area where you are having a difficulty, you can always reach out to the IKS division with regards to that particular subject area, and they will be able to either guide you or even provide funds if in case it is relevant.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Namaste, Yoti
All the
ji.
best.
Namaste, Yoti ji. Could you please ask your question? Dr. अमरजीत सिंह जी।
सर प्रणाम सभी को।
Yes.
सर आप
Yes.
ये वर्कशॉप रियली बहुत ही इंफॉर्मेटिव था, बहुत ही अच्छा लगा। सर मैं हेमवती नंदन बहुगुणा गढ़वाल में शिक्षा विभाग में प्राध्यापक हूँ और IKS में सर नेट हूँ मैं, लेकिन ये वर्कशॉप रियली बहुत ही इंफॉर्मेटिव था, सब बहुत ही अच्छा लगा। अगर बोथ लैंग्वेज में होगा तो सर और अच्छा लगेगा, बाइलिंगुअल में होगा।
बस टाइम का प्रॉब्लम है, मीन वी कांट repeat, नहीं तो I do agree with you. Maybe in future we will have some courses.
नहीं, very nice, but very nice.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay.
I think we'll just take one more question and stop.
Yes.
नमस्कार सर, नमस्कार मैम। मैम मुझे पूछना था कि जैसे अभी एक FDP हुआ था नीति शास्त्र पे, पर उसका वेबसाइट पे कुछ मिला नहीं था। जब वो हो गया था तो इंस्टाग्राम और सोशल मीडिया के थ्रू पता चला था कि वो नीति शास्त्र पे एक FDP हुआ है। ये मेरा फर्स्ट क्वेरी थी। और सेकंड क्वेरी ये थी कि जो अभी एक इंस्टीट्यूशनल इंटर्नशिप जो ईयरली अनाउंस होता है, उसमें एक क्लॉज है कि द प्रिंसिपल इन्वेस्टिगेटर शुड हैव एटलीस्ट 4 या 5 years of experience in teaching. If somebody has, say, let's say 2.5 or 3 years of experience, they can't be the PI. So this was one of the other questions which I have.
Piyush, I think it's related to IKS only.
Yes. Regarding the PI, that's the guidelines we have to follow. So 4 to 5 years for PI, institutional and internship. So that's the criteria. Every PI has to follow that. There is no scope to release. And the first one, which you about Niti Shastra, that's a registered participants. It's not available in public. So it's a faculty development program. No,
जी।
only so it's not in public.
तो सर फैकल्टी के लिए ही मैं पूछ रही हूँ कि जो FDP होता है वो उस जैसे मैं वेबसाइट देखती रहती हूँ, पर उस FDP के बारे में कुछ इन्फॉर्मेशन थी नहीं। तो ऐसे एफडीपीज के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन कहीं एक पर्टिकुलर जगह है जहाँ से मिलेगी, सो दैट वी कैन ऑल्सो एनरोल? आई एम
No, ये आपके लिए नहीं है। ये यूजीसी एंड आईकेएस डिवीजन का कोलाबोरेशन में हुआ था। ये पर्टिकुलर प्रोफेसर का वो 1 साल पहले ही चूज हो गया था और उस लोगों का ही 1 to 3 4 टाइम्स ट्रेनिंग दिए जा रहा है। तो इट्स ए
अच्छा।
internal process. You can't enroll in that process. अस्तु. So whenever the announcement for FDP will come, that will come to our website only. अस्तु.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
अस्तु तर्हि प्रणाम madam. We can close with a Shanti mantra.
Yes, please.
सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।